today's briefing is really important because we just came out with a three-part process, 3 videos that came out that were about negotiating with the extraterrestrials, public negotiations. Mind you, there have been negotiations with extraterrestrials for a very long time with the United States, at least going back into the 1940s, but all of that has been secret. So the difference between what we're doing and what governments have done is that what we're doing is public. And there's a big difference because there's different extraterrestrials that listen to and take note of and think they're important, the public negotiations as compared with the private secret negotiations. The basic idea with negotiations is if you're having secret negotiations and the conditions of those negotiations are never public, and also the results of the negotiations are never public, and if documents are signed and if those are never public, should those actually be applicable to the general population, which never saw those negotiations, never heard of those negotiations, never even were told that the people or the beings that they're negotiating with even exist, and then the results, the agreements, were never published at all. So should those papers, those results, those agreements be worth anything? The obvious answer is, in any realm of any place in the universe, no, they wouldn't be worth anything. You can make any agreement you want, but that doesn't affect other people that have nothing to do with that agreement. Of course, you can go and militarily conquer somebody, and that doesn't have an agreement associated with it, and by military force you enforce your will on those other people. But agreements are different. Eventually, the people affected by the agreements have to know, if they're going to agree with the agreements, they have to at least know that the agreements exist. Okay. All right, take for example the American slave trade. Back in the old days, somebody could have said, all right, we're going to negotiate a treaty here, an agreement here. We're going to go over to Africa and pick up 300 slaves. And when we get back, you're going to agree to pay for those surviving 300 slaves after we get the boat back and give them to you. Okay, then a document can be found, can be signed and created and so on. Now, does that document actually relate to the people of Africa? They didn't sign that agreement. They have nothing to do with that agreement. So the only thing that the people on the boat can do is go over there and through sheer muscle, guns, force, kidnap people. But that has nothing to do with the agreement. The agreement doesn't have anything to do with the people of Africa. As far as the people of Africa are concerned, they were kidnapped. And it has nothing to do with the agreement. And then when they get here, they are sold according to some agreement based on the buyers and so on. But the slave trade that occurred in the United States, of course we're talking a few hundred years ago, but still, the slave trade that occurred in the United States, the agreements were not with the Africans. So the Africans had nothing to do with those agreements. So if you have governmental people in secret negotiating with extraterrestrials and everything is kept in secret, does that relate to the public? Well, you can sort of consider the public as comparable to the Africans back in the ancient slave days. They had nothing to do with the agreements for buying and selling. So any agreement that's made between government forces, government authorities, and extraterrestrials, that's not an agreement with the public. The public has nothing to do with those agreements, especially if the agreements were never even published. So what we have is a situation which force, sanctions, enforcement, military force, police force, censorship force, controlling the elements of the mechanisms of power, the media, the military, the police, all of that stuff, the intelligence organizations, that type of control is similar to having the boats go over and forcefully kidnap people. They has nothing to do with the agreements. The public has nothing to do with the agreements. Okay? So the agreements then are between the authorities, the traditional authorities, and the extraterrestrials. Those are where the agreements are for. So those people are the only people that are associated with those agreements. You cannot collectively draw in the rest of the public. Just like in the old slave days, you couldn't say, well, we wrote up this agreement that we're going to sell the slaves after they get off the boat to these people in America. So the people in Africa have to go along with that. We wrote up an agreement. The agreement says that after we bring you to the United States in a boat, we're going to sell you. Here it is. It's written in black and white on a piece of paper. Just think about that. Do the people of Africa have anything to do with that? So you can't have authorities making a deal with extraterrestrials and then suddenly saying that those agreements are applicable to the general public when the public had no knowledge that the agreements actually happened and had no input in the agreements at all. So the public is being treated very much like Africans when they were being kidnapped for the slave trade. Because they were not involved in the agreements, they are not party to the agreements, and the only way you can get the general public involved in the entire thing is through force and secrecy. So the real thing is, what then brought us to wanting to have public negotiations? Well, if we have public negotiations, then certain extraterrestrials will actually value those public negotiations more than the secret negotiations. So let's say 10,000 people listen to our public agreements. Now, more than that have listened to the public negotiations, but let's say 10,000 people. That's probably 9,900 and plus something more than have ever seen the private negotiations between traditional human authorities and the extraterrestrials. So let's say 20,000 people watch our public negotiations, and it only gets more and more and more. So the authorities know that if the agreements that were made in private were ever made public, everything, the whole house of cards would collapse, and all the authorities who had anything to do with it, they'd be running for the border. They are totally indefensible. So that's why the public negotiations are so important. They actually carry much more weight. That doesn't mean that we know what the results of those negotiations are going to be. It doesn't mean that the Galactic Federation of Worlds is going to actually come to an agreement with the domain to help force reptilian and Orion forces out of the planet. It just means that we have formally requested that to occur, and we've shown people what we've done. So it's public. That's how it is. So it's got more legitimacy than governmental negotiations with extraterrestrials, which have zero legitimacy because they were never made public. All right. Now, the question that you should be asking is, what the heck brought us to this place, to this spot? So for this live stream, this intelligence briefing, I want to bring those three major videos that we had for the public negotiations into perspective. The first one was the appeal to the Galactic Federation of Worlds. The second one was reaching out to the domain to see if they'd be willing to help out and work out an agreement with the Galactic Federation of Worlds. And the third one was a return to the Galactic Federation of Worlds to formally let them and everyone else in humanity know what we did, and to finalize what we're formally asking, and to formally state that any private agreements that were made between human traditional authorities and extraterrestrials are null and void. So all that's public now too. So you can say, well, what the heck brought us to this, to assume that these negotiations would be important, that these groups are important? You should all be asking, did it just come out of whole cloth? Did it just come out of the head? So this is it. I want to go through the thought process that brought us to this. It has to do with the Farsight projects that we've been doing. We never thought we'd be in this position way back in the day. In fact, when I wrote my first book on extraterrestrials and using remote viewing to explore them, Cosmic Voyage, which is available as a free download at my personal website, CourtneyBrown.com. That was a bestseller in its day, but it's available as a free download. And Cosmic Voyage, in those days, I honestly thought the only thing that was necessary is for us to figure out that there are extraterrestrials, that they are visiting Earth, and in fact, just to tell people about it. And I thought that the story was over, just saying, wow, look what we discovered. They exist. That's what I naively thought back in those days. All right, let's run forward and find out, let's look at the process for how we got to where we are today. One of the most important early projects, it was actually published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal called the Journal for Scientific Exploration, was a project on the multiple universe project that we had. And that was a very interesting project because we tried, and by the way, the paper for that can be found on our website. We tried to discover, investigate, actually we had done already previous stuff, so we already knew the results, how it was going to be, but we did this publicly this time. We had a situation where we were having remote viewers remote view certain targets, but the targets were not chosen yet. So they would do their sessions and then they'd send them in and we'd encrypt them and put them up on the website, and then tens of thousands of people would download them all over the world. And then a month later, a tasker, someone who was a trusted person, Lynn Buchanan was one of them, picked a target. And that target was an event that happened after all the remote viewing sessions were submitted, put up on the web, and downloaded by tens of thousands of people. But it was done after that, but it was done, the event happened after the remote viewing sessions were distributed, all encrypted so no one could see it. But the event, so the event was in the future of the remote viewing sessions. But as far as the tasker was concerned, it happened within the last 30 days, so the event happened before the tasker picked the target. So the event happened after the sessions were done. So when they were doing the remote viewing sessions, the event had not happened yet, and it was any event that was going to be chosen by a tasker in the next, 30 to 60 days afterwards. But when the tasker chose a target, the tasker would be choosing a target that happened in between when the sessions were available for download and when he was picking the target. And those sessions were amazing. They were so great. And we published them in a major journal, and the paper can be found on our website, farsight.org. All right, that was important because that really demonstrated that we did have multiple timelines. And the only way we could select out a particular timeline was to have the tasker pick the target in that tasker's past. So it could be in the future of when the remote viewers were doing their sessions, but it had to be in the past of the tasker, because the theory that we were working with is that what makes a target is the thoughts of the person picking the target or closing the sessions, comparing the sessions to the actual target. So there's a telepathic connection between when the remote viewer does a session and the person who's analyzing the session. For example, if you do a remote viewing session, you're doing it to satisfy the informational needs of that person who's picking a target or who's analyzing your data. Okay, so that's the person that the telepathic connection is going to be made to, because you're trying to satisfy that person's name, that person's thoughts, well, or desires or needs. Well, that person has the target on his or her mind. So those thoughts make the target. It's like a laser pointer. So the remote viewer essentially goes into the future, picks up the concept of the target, then goes to the target and describes the target in full detail. Now the remote viewer is not just reading the tasker's mind, because the remote viewer finds out much more information about the target than the tasker knew. But it's an interesting thing, and I wrote a whole book about that, Remote Viewing, the Science and Theory of Non-Physical Perception, and that multiple universe project was a big thing for us. But it really established that there are multiple timelines, and the only way we can pick one is by having a history for somebody that can pick a target out of that person's history, because that person has a single timeline the person is taking the information from, taking the target from. So that was important. Okay, so multiple timelines. And I explain more in that paper if you want to know more. Well, then we started to do other projects, other thoughts, other things were coming. One of the things we were looking at, I did an early project on the exploding planet, or the idea of the asteroid belt. What created the asteroid belt? And we had a whole bunch of sessions that came in saying it was a planet before it was an asteroid belt. And that makes sense. If you look at the asteroid series, that's virtually a planetoid. Those things are big, those rocks. You have to have a gravity source that gets all that stuff together and compresses it to make a rock. The cosmic dust doesn't make a rock. A gravity source makes a rock. So all those asteroids obviously had to come from a big planet in order to be rocks in the first place. Anyway, that was an important thing. Wow, a planet blew up in our solar system. Then there was another project called the Great Pyramid of Giza. And that was important because that was the first time we actually saw that the Great Pyramid of Giza, we were originally just trying to figure out how it was built. We were thinking all types of, now the remote viewers were all done blind, all doing their sessions blind, but when I was creating the target, I was thinking things like maybe they floated the blocks into place by flooding the whole area with water and then taking boats. And I had no way how they got those big blocks into place. But the Great Pyramid of Giza, under totally blind conditions, we had 2 remote viewers that described the same thing. It was using advanced ET technology to float stuff, and there were slaves, lots of slaves, who were treated horribly. And it was a slave population, and it really looked like it was being kept as a prison. And at the end, when the Great Pyramid of Giza population was sort of dispersed, that was because there was another extraterrestrial group that came in and sort of blew them up, got rid of the ET authorities. And that came out of like the exploding, that came out of the Great Pyramid of Giza. So that was the first time I actually said, wow, so this planet was operating at one point like a prison? That's sort of weird. Okay, all right. And then we had another one called the base on Mars. Now there was very clear astronomical photos, planetary photos from the orbiters of what looked like a base. They had these domes, and then they had a pipe, and the pictures are available on our website, the base on Mars. They had a pipe that came out of one of the domes and then extended into the air, and it was spraying, and you could see the spray clear as day, plus the shadow underneath the spray. It was like spraying waste products. So we did a project on that and got, tons of information. So it looked like Mars may have been dead at one point, but there was somebody still there. And the people who were operating the base seemed to have been operating it as a hardship post. Okay, so it was interesting. We were sort of getting the idea that ETs are sort of doing stuff, and that the base seemed to have been an ancient base that they were trying to fix up and use again in some way. And then afterwards, we did a project on Cydonia Mars, or the pyramid, but we actually went back in time to when the pyramid structures and the Sphinx on the so-called face on Mars and all that was in its prime, and there was in fact a civilization that the people were picking up, the remote viewers were picking up. And then there was a project called the Aliens on Iapetus. There was a really clear photograph on Iapetus using one of the space probes that NASA sent up there, and there was a really clear image of what looked like buildings on the side of a crater. They looked like they had steps, like major steps, and buildings and walls, and it looked like things that were nuclear reactors, the way they were constructed. And so we did a project on that, and the only thing that the remote viewers were told was just to go to that crater and see what they see. And sure enough, both of them said, on the side of the wall, there was these things. And it turned out that the thing was like a hotel, and it was a retreat, and they had people that would go there. And now you think about it, what in the world would someone go to Iapetus for a retreat? Now look, already you have Branson and Bezos, the people, the 2 major billionaire types, trying to get into space on their own rockets first. It's a natural thing for tourists to want to go up. If they have enough money, they just do it. So the head of Amazon is competing with the head of another company to be the first person, the first commercial person to go into space. If they could get to Iapetus easily, they would do it. And if you had a technological capability of flying ships there with, ET type stuff, with normal type of, ET type ships, flying saucer type ships that wouldn't take a long time to get there, for sure people would sign up, and that would be one heck of a retreat to go to, with the rings of Saturn right above you on the stars. I mean, that's a sight, best sight in the whole galaxy. People would go. All right, so we found that was like a hotel, and then something happened in the solar system that was like a war, and it disrupted the whole thing, and the people were stranded on that facility in Iapetus. And it was like, where do we go now? It was a really interesting story, Aliens on Iapetus. Okay, so ET seemed to have a complicated picture in the solar system. And then we went to something on Earth. We did a project called the Phoenix Lights. And in fact, the Phoenix Lights were in fact extraterrestrial spacecraft who were trying to let humans know wake them up a little bit and let them know that ETs exist. They were basically trying to push past the censorship of and information control of human authorities, and trying to get people to recognize that the, ETs actually did exist. Fascinating project on the Phoenix Lights. And then we did the Roswell UFO crash, which indeed was a crash. And there were ships, at least one ship, maybe two, and they crashed, and we did that whole story about that was actually a real thing. And then we did a project on Area 51. And indeed, we found Area 51, and we went into Area 51, and there were huge facilities underground, many levels, and the farthest you go down, you actually got reptilians. Now, the remote viewers did, for all of our projects, everything was done blind, and the remote viewers, when they got far enough down, they saw reptilians. Now, I didn't tell them, it wasn't part of the target to go down there and see reptilians, it was just to go into Area 51 and find out what's there. When they dropped down the tunnels, and at the lowest level, there were reptilians. So like, oh, okay, so people always say, if there's reptilians, where are they? Well, now we know exactly where they are. There's one place where they are. And how did they get into underneath one of the most secret facilities in the United States? Well, that may be one of the reasons it is one of the most secret facilities in the United States. So then we did a project on the war in heaven, because it did look like there was a planet that we call Maldek that blew up, that created the asteroid belt. And Mars looked very strange. It has craters all on one side, but the other side is essentially crater-free. So something blew up on one side of Mars and hit it like a shotgun and created all these craters. And that caused a lot of damage in Mars. So it said, you know, it looks like there was some type of destruction event. So we just did a project that we later titled The War on Heaven, but we originally, the actual targets were not the war in heaven. The actual targets were what caused the craters, things like that. They were neutral type targets. And we in fact found that the whole craters on Mars and the exploding planet were a result of a war type situation. It looks like the results clearly indicated that the planet Maldek was basically populated with a lot of reptilians who were beginning to seriously dominate Mars. The Mars group were trying to fight back, and the only way they could fight back is they're trying to destroy the weapon systems of Maldek, of the reptilians, and it looks like they shot something into a weapons depot where there were a lot of nuclear weapons on Maldek, and the whole planet blew up. And that's what the explosion produced, a shock wave that eventually hit Iapetus, and that's what caused the splotch on the side of Iapetus, that moon of Saturn. And then we did one on Moses, and we just sort of said, okay, well, let's go back to Earth. And we just said, Moses, what caused the plagues and things like that? And we found out that indeed there was extraterrestrials doing those plague things. So there was a lot of manipulation back in those days, and that sort of connected up with the Great Pyramid of Giza. Now, mind you, at this point, we had still not come to any conclusion that there was a prison going on in the United States, or not in the United States, but on the planet Earth. And then we did another one on the secret Apollo moon missions, because there was certainly enough evidence to suggest that the Apollo craft, there was a few Apollo craft with the boosters and everything that were completely made. And the intelligence community, I've dealt with them enough to know they're not idiots, they're really smart. And if they have a couple completely ready to go Apollo spacecraft with the boosters and everything, Saturn V rocket, they're not going to let those things go. And they're going to want a few things by themselves, and just to go up and get some information. So we targeted the idea of secret Apollo moon missions, and we did find out that there were at least one, but maybe two moon missions that were done in private. Now, some people have complained and said, no, you can't hide that. You can hide that. They actually do have launches lots of times at night, and sure, everybody sees those launches at night. Defense satellites are sent up. Very secret military satellites are sent up on rockets. They do them at night. They send them up. They don't announce it. Of course, the whole state can see the flames and everything like that, but they don't announce what those is. And those and the public can be told anything about those things. So we have lots of secret launches anyway. Anyway, there was a couple, at least one, maybe two, Apollo moon missions. And so we apparently did go a couple more times. And we had some strange encounters, and those things are available on our service. Then we waited Oumuamua and the bird of prey. Oumuamua was that strange, very long craft that looks like it was just floating in from outside the solar system. It came from galactic space. And it came in, and we've had a major astronomer, probably the leading astronomer at Harvard, say that he thinks that that is an extraterrestrial, either an extraterrestrial craft or something left over from an extraterrestrial craft. And that Harvard astronomer has gone on record, published a book, gone on lots of YouTube and news shows saying that's what he thinks it is. And he really basically wants to get it out there so that he can say he said it first, because he's pretty sure that that's really what it is. But we did a remote viewing project on this Oumuamua, and we did find out it was a derelict spacecraft. And it was originally what looks like a prison ship that was attacked, destroyed, people died in it, but it was originally a prison ship. And then we did, in that same project, the bird of prey, because it was a really great photograph. Actually, it was a video on coming from the ISS of the Dragon X spacecraft that was being brought into supply. And in the background, you could clearly see what looked like a triangular array of lights passing by. So we said it looked like a ship. It looked as clear as day like a ship. So we did a project, the Oumuamua and the bird of prey. The bird of prey was whatever that thing was that had the lights on it. And indeed, it was a reptilian ship. And Princess had a really interesting session with that, because she seems to have some type of relationship with the reptilians to be able to talk with them. They don't seem to mind her talking to them. She went right in there, and there were kids in there, and she dealt with the reptilian. I mean, but everybody saw them and went in, but it was a very interesting project. Later some people complained, disinformation type sorts actually got involved also, saying, no, those are just lights on the planet Earth. But that was so stupid. Anyone should be able to see the difference. The same video also has the Earth orbiting in different sections, and you can clearly see what the Earth looks like. It spins in a different direction and a different rate of speed. Everything's different. And those lights in the triangular shape were going at a different speed. They were different configuration, a different direction. It was clearly that they were not anything on the planet Earth. And then I remember I was just watching a interesting show. I watched the Bill Maher show on HBO, and he was interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson, a famous physicist, and he was being asked, Bill Maher was saying, well, the government is now saying that these UFOs are real and that they're being witnessed by trained pilots, and they're releasing the results and saying these are real craft. What do you think they are? And Neil deGrasse Tyson was very interesting. He said, I don't know. And then he went to say, it could be a glitch. There's always a glitch. There is such resistance to accepting what's right in front of your face by everybody, or at least by so many people. So here we have the bird of prey clearly on ISS video, and people are saying, no, it can't be that. It's got to be the Earth spinning. It clearly is not the Earth spinning. Just like the videos that were released by the U.S. military. Actually, it's mostly the Navy. The military is very split on this. Some of the military really wants everything to be shut down, hush hush, and the Navy seems to be on the point of trying to get things released. So there's differences going on behind the scenes. But anyway, so with that project, Oumuamua and the bird of prey, that was a real interesting thing to say. Extraterrestrials crafts have been passing through our solar system, even derelict spacecraft, and also here's a picture of one coming out of the ISS. And we did sessions on it, and our sessions totally matched what you saw on video. And then we had the thing called the death traps, because by this time we were starting to wonder more about what all this secrecy is, especially on many of the extraterrestrial side of what they do. And we had, with a lot of our other work, we had started to get an idea that when people die, it's just not clear sailing. So we did some sessions. The project was called the Death Traps, but when we did the actual sessions, it was not go see the Death Traps. That's just what we labeled it afterwards. The project was just what happens to a person when they die and they run into some type of problems. And then what happens to a person when they die and they don't run into some type of problems. Well, when they die and they do run into some type of problems, they get drawn in by the light, and then they get into a chamber-like thing, and huge high-level like lightning storm hits them, extremely high voltage, and it rattles them, and it empties their mind. They're like numb, they can't think of anything, and then afterwards, other thoughts are brought in, so to sort of fill the gap, and then they get recycled. That's when we decided to label it the Death Traps. Oh, wow, so that's what happens when people die. So let me just cut to the chase about that one Death Traps and say one thing. This is what we have figured out so far. When you die, you're going to see that stuff. It's technology. It's there. You're going to see the light. And when you die, you're going to see the light and you're going to be drawn to the light. It's a wave, like an electromagnetic wave that produces a pleasure sensation, and you're drawn to it. And then you're going to meet somebody, and that somebody's going to draw you to them. And then after you get sort of drawn close enough, it's like a web, like a spider's web. And no matter how hard you fight, you can't get out of it. The more you fight, the more you get stuck, just like a spider's web. Then the electroshock treatment happens, you forget who you were, there's no memory, and then new stuff comes in. And part of the new stuff comes in is you often seeing people like elders who say, you've got to go back and work on a little bit more of your personality. You've got some things you need to work on. You haven't quite figured everything out. And you need to have another experience to sort of sort it all out. And a lot of people who are in near-death experiences and then come back often get that memory that they're being told they need to come back. Now, what you're not being told is that the bastards who are telling you to do that, to come back, they're the ones who should be imprisoned, and they are not good folks, and they're mean, nasty buggers, and those are the ones who are telling you, you need to go back. They're trying to get you, it's part of the recycle system. Now you can say, that's an awful lot of trouble to go through to get people to recycle back on a planet. Folks, this system was developed over millions of years. They had lots of time to work this out. And a lot of those beings that you're seeing are certainly avatars, automated things that are computer generated. They're not real people saying, you need to go back. This is the Council of Elders, and we think you need to have a choice to go back. You have to make the decision yourself, but honestly, we think you need to go back. And then you voluntarily go back. That's how the prison system works. The prison system works by making it so that it's a voluntary system. Your memory gets erased. Now, let me ask you this. What can you possibly learn by coming back if your memory's erased? Put it together. If they're erasing their memory, there's nothing you're going to learn. Memory is gone. Learning is gone. They're just recycling you back into the system, and they're using it in a way to make it seem like you're doing this voluntarily. You're not doing this voluntarily. And those people don't have to do it, and they're bastards. Those are the people who should be in prison. Those very same people that you see after death that look like they're the good elders telling you, we think in your best interest. There's a couple wrinkles in your personality you have to worry about. Listen, folks, you've been alive for millions of years, and you're going to be alive for millions of years. You don't need to come back here to work on a little wrinkle. You got millions of years to work on whatever you want. And those people have way worse wrinkles. The point is, that's what the whole death trap thing is all about. So let me get back into the process that we did here. And then we did a project called Where We Came From, which is a really important project. We're trying to figure out what causes some people to have authoritarian type personalities that like to order people to do things versus other people that sort of are wanting free will, people to choose. And you've seen that happen even in the United States, where you have two different sides, polarized sides, where some people are arguing, we don't really think the democratic process should be run the way it is. We think we know what should be done. And the other one saying, no, let everybody choose, make sure every vote counts and things like that. And you see also authoritarian personalities in other countries treating their countries like, no, we've got to do it this way. You have some countries who are killing opposition leaders, imprisoning opposition leaders, kidnapping journalists. They want to control things. And then you have other people in other places saying, no, stop all that. Let's just be free and let people decide what they want. We tried to say where we came from. Where did we come from? There were these different personality types happen. We did a whole project on that was fascinating. And then we finally did a project on the human leadership has been compromised. Mind you, these titles were done after more generic type of targeting was done. And then when we got the results, then we came up with the title. And we said, of all sort of benign-looking human leadership, let's go after some popes. Popes are very influential because they run a religion. Let's see if anyone's meddling with their minds. So we went into the minds of popes, and sure enough, we found direct mental influencing on the popes. Now, let me ask you, if HEs are messing with the popes to get them to feel religious experiences, to keep the party line with regard to what the people should be told to do, to keep... Religions are very powerful mechanisms for keeping everybody under control. Their ideologies, their belief systems, their doctrine. So keeping people under control is a big deal. And a pope is sort of the top of the line of keeping a lot of people under control. We found direct mental influencing to keep those popes in line. And then we said, well, listen, if it happens to popes, then it probably happens to almost all traditional human leadership. Every president of any country, every prime minister is probably a potential victim of this kind of thing. And they wouldn't even know it. That's the point. They wouldn't even know it. They could not even, it could be that they don't even believe in extraterrestrials, but they are the potential victims. And then what happens is we also see reward systems being set up so that there is a reward for people to do certain things. Presidents are told stuff about the extraterrestrials, and then afterwards they say, but I'm not going to tell you what I know. And some of the people have said that point blank in their interviews. I can tell you, but I know things, but I'm not going to tell you. So, what causes that type of mental control that they obey things like that? Anyway, all right. Then we did another project about Zeus. We just wanted to find out what this Greek god was. This just something that the ancients, Greek and Roman people just came up with, and they said, and we found out no, in fact, these Greek gods were real. They were real people. Zeus was a rapist. He loved to go after young, underage girls and rape them in their own homes, in the same homes where their parents stayed. So that's what Zeus was. But he was a brutal dictator. That's what he was, and he was a real life being, and he had a ship. And that's when we started to figure out that he was running the place like a prison. We started to pick out lots of stuff that was really interesting. And then that's where we started to realize that he was actually thinking of this place, because we did deep mind probes of Zeus. He was thinking of this place as a prison, and he was the warden. And then we did another project. We decided to start hopping around, Göbekli Tepe. We did find again in Göbekli Tepe in Turkey that there was extraterrestrial influence in the construction of Göbekli Tepe. And again, we had sort of like a slave-type force, but people being mentally manipulated to work on these things. You have to understand, Göbekli Tepe was a very complicated thing. What forced people to build it? Were they paying them a lot of money? What forced them to build it? That's a question. There was a lot of mental influence to get them to do that stuff. If you say, okay, we're going to build the Great Pyramids, what caused all those people to build the Great Pyramids, even if there was ET technology being used to help out? There was obviously a slave force at the point of, well, maybe they didn't have guns like we have, but at the point of a metaphorical gun. That's how you get slaves to do things like that. So we saw the same type of thing happening with Göbekli Tepe, and then we saw the idea of this is acting like a prison. And then we did another project on the Eye of the Sahara in Mauritania. We got the same type of thing. That was a big thing that happened with the Eye of the Sahara, but we also got the thing of extraterrestrial conflict, and they were destroying a facility that was being run like a prison system. So there were different extraterrestrials fighting things. And then we did a project on the remote viewing of envisioning Star Wars. We really wanted to go into George Lucas's mind, because it looked like what was going on in George Lucas's mind in the creation of Star Wars it just matched too much of what we're seeing out there in real life with remote viewing. And indeed, we found that exact thing. We found out that according to our remote viewing data, George Lucas was involved in a huge galactic battle, a really big galactic war. It was a space opera type of thing. And he was on one side, and there was others involved, and he was a bureaucrat on one side, and he sort of witnessed and saw all this stuff, and there was battling going on and intergalactic stuff going on. And he basically, whether he knows it or not, here as a human, he's remembering. He's not creating this stuff out of whole cloth. He's actually remembering stuff that actually happened, and he's putting it down as a scriptwriter. Now, I'm not saying he knows that or believes that. I'm just saying that's what our remote viewing data suggests. Okay? So that was sort of an indication that, wow, there was something big happening in the galaxy. So all this other stuff that we're seeing is fitting into a picture of the ETs fight, and there's like battles going on, and it's like really big battles, like over the whole galaxy type battles. And then we did a project on Ra, the sun god, and that was similar to Zeus. And then he was a brutal dictator. It doesn't seem as if Ra was Zeus. It seems as if Ra was another guy. He could have been Zeus, but we didn't pick up a lot of sexual predation with Ra. We did pick up a lot of sexual predation with Zeus. But Ra was a crazy bastard. And he eventually, in order to control the human slave population that he was running as a prison, by that time we clearly saw he was running it as a prison, he ordered Hathor, which was a mentally unstable person, to basically scare the dickens out of them and blow them all up, and with this weapon that we now call the Eye of Hathor, or the Eye of Ra. And that project was really huge because we really saw that this was a brutally enforced prison system by that time. So that's at the time we really realized, wow, okay, so this really has been run as a prison system. And then we went back in time and said, okay, what about the dinosaurs? That was like a big thing. And people say that some asteroid crashed into Earth and killed all the dinosaurs. How nice and tidy. Well, so we said, let's just see what happened. And we found that indeed there were not just one, but many planetoid bodies that were crashing into Earth, and it was an act of war. This was a reptilian planet, and they had intelligent reptilians who were living in harmony with the with the environment back in those days. They didn't seem to have an industrial base, so they must have come from somewhere else, but they were living with those other dinosaurs, but they were quite intelligent and they were technologically advanced. And there was an attempt to blast the reptilians off the planet. There was a war. And they hit the planet with rocks, asteroid-type rocks. That's a means of warfare that apparently extraterrestrials used, to throw rocks at each other. And then they also had ships that blew up any reptilians trying to escape. So when reptilians tried to get to ships and go out, they'd be blown up. So it was a knockdown, drag out, get the reptilians off this planet completely and start over again. And that was starting to make sense with regard to the conflicts between Maldek and Mars, and now the destruction of the dinosaurs. This reptilian versus non-reptilian sort of struggle seems to have been going on a very long time, and it's probably being reflected on something that's happened in the galaxy as well. And then we finally said, okay, let's see about these reptilians. Where are they right now? And we did a project on the reptilians here and now. They have lots of underground bases. They think of humans both as a genetic source and even as a food source. But the basic thing, they think of humans the way we think of farm animals. And so we did a whole project on the reptilians. By that time, we were clearly seeing that the reptilians are involved in the planetary slave enforcement, the prison system, but that they like to keep themselves hidden. They like to have other intermediaries do their stuff. They never like to show themselves openly. They like to get other people to do the stuff. And so we did another project right after that called The Mystery of Pumapunku, just to touch base with yet another archaeological site to see if in fact there was extraterrestrial influence back in those days, and in fact there was. So we see this ongoing extraterrestrial influence, almost always in the form of humanoid extraterrestrials. Yet reptilians seem to be operating behind the scenes. And so finally we just said, okay, there's clearly a struggle between different extraterrestrial groups. One group seems to be fighting or in favor of humanity, and the other one seems to be in favor of continuing this prison planet concept. So we did a project on the Galactic Federation of Worlds just to see what would happen. And in fact, we did find a body. And to our surprise, we found that to be a very huge body of extraterrestrial civilizations. And they are highly conflicted, although they were very surprised to have us show up. The remote viewers popped in and they were saying, what? They were surprised to see us pop in and show up. They're not surprised anymore, but at that time they were. And it was interesting to see the responses from the remote viewers when that happened. But then it seemed that the remote viewers were picking up that the majority of the Galactic Federation of Worlds wanted to help us, but they were at reservations. They were basically worried that they didn't seem to be united politically. The minority, but a very large minority, seemed to be hesitant. And then the military thought that they might not be able to win a head-to-head, knockdown, drag-out body with the reptilians and the Orions combined. So we said, so there were two things. We said there's a lack of unity in the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and the military had some questions about whether they could actually pull off a direct confrontation. So that was a surprise to us, because we thought if we just found the Galactic Federation of Worlds, then boom, it would be done. And you know, there's the head of the Israeli Space Agency, now retired, he's a professor. He's come out openly and said, yeah, there is such a thing. He actually talked about different groups that are not members of the Galactic Federation of Worlds that we studied, that we looked at. They're actually members of the reptilian and the oppressing side. So the words Galactic Federation of Worlds has been confused in the media. But nonetheless, the Galactic Federation of Worlds does exist. And even people like the head of the Israeli Space Agency has openly said, yeah, and deals have been made and papers have been signed and so on. All right. So then we said, okay, well, if the Galactic Federation of Worlds exists and the reptilians exist, some agreements must have been done. So we said, what is the first major meeting between, American president and or the representatives and extraterrestrials? And in fact, we did find that there were meetings, two types of meetings. One with the group that we call the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and the U.S. president absolutely demanded technology, and the Galactic Federation of Worlds representatives said, no, we're not going to give it to you. You're not ready for it. And then there was another meeting with reptilian and Orions, and the reptilians and the humanoid types, which we call the Orions, they actually stayed in separate rooms. And the human and the reptilians negotiated with the president, and the results of those negotiations in that project were really clearly the U.S. president demanding, I'm talking like almost like a child, just absolutely demanding, technology. And then the reptilian and the Orion said, sure, you want tech? We'll give you tech. We'll explain how to use it, the whole thing. And then that led to agreements. Okay. Then we said, something's wrong. I mean, why would the U.S. do something? So we had heard that there had been a large expedition into Antarctica right after World War II. And it just didn't make sense. You had this huge flotilla of an aircraft carrier and all the support ships, multiple destroyers, a submarine, a whole bunch of aircraft. It was a huge flotilla, the type you attack a whole continent with, that flew in, that went into Antarctica. And what they said was they were just seeing if there was a possibility of maybe building some bases in Antarctica. Folks, that was the most stupidest cover story in the whole universe. You send one boat and maybe a scout aircraft to check out whether you can a place to build something. You don't send 5,000 troops and an aircraft carrier with all the support ships, including repair ships and tons of aircraft and submarines and the whole work. You don't send all of those armed to the teeth to go to see if the mountains might have a place to build a base. Anyway, so we just said, that's called Operation Highjump. We just said, we had our remote viewers just go and see what was there. And in fact, there was a huge battle. So right after World War II, apparently the US forces had heard that the Nazis were in fact experimenting with stuff in building bases in Antarctica, and that there was a huge base there. And apparently the US forces wanted to destroy that last base, get rid of the Nazis completely. So they sent in Admiral Byrd and the flotilla. And what happened when they got there is they got their ass whipped. They were just blown out of the sky. Most of the aircraft were just destroyed. They had to run instead of Operation Highjump. It was Operation Tail Between Your Legs, get out of there type of situation. And Admiral Byrd later made some comments in an interview he made in South America, saying we have to get used to the idea that there's going to be attacks from the poles. That's going to swamp any battles that we have ever had before. We have to get used to the idea that the world has changed in new ways. So what happened was that there was an extraterrestrial attack. Now, basically what happened, as we pieced it together, it looks like the Nazis had a base and reptilian extraterrestrials with humanoid helpers assisted the Nazis to build it. The Nazis were small players in it. They were not big players in it. But that's not what the U.S. thought. The U.S. thought that the Nazis had access to these ships, these saucer ships, that came out of the water and out of the mountain, out of a hole in the mountain, but also right up out of the water, and attacked the American forces and blew the heck out of them. And so that scared the dickens out of the American president, because then they thought that those were Nazis, just Nazis. In fact, they were actually, it was a Nazi base, but they were extraterrestrials, humanoid extraterrestrials, who were being ordered. The master and commander of the extraterrestrials was reptilian, but the actual extraterrestrials who were actually flying the crafts, the flying saucers that blew up the American ships, those were the American aircraft mostly. Those are being flown by humanoid-looking, blonde-haired type humanoid-looking extraterrestrials. And the Americans just thought that the entire thing was being run by Nazis who had incredible military power. So that was the result of Operation Highjump. And that explained why the Americans were so demanding for extraterrestrial tech. They said because they thought that these Nazis in Antarctica had this incredible tech and that they could completely defeat the American military in like a day if they fly out of Antarctica and attack the American mainland. And so the American president was terrified. What the American president didn't know is that the reptilians and the Orions set up the entire battle in the first place to scare the American president, so the American president would sign the agreements. So that's what the Americans didn't know. They were duped like kids. Anyway, so that resulted in the agreements between the president and the extraterrestrials. All right, so now we have a situation where we've done all of this background work, so we finally figured out, oh my gosh, so this place is being operated as a prison. And then we had another project called The Escape, where we actually investigated the sort of net around the planet. It has a few holes in it, the machinery that actually works to get the death traps to work. And then we said, okay, and we have the Galactic Federation of Worlds is not united, it needs to be united. So what they seemed to need the most to become politically united was a direct request from humans, a public human group. That's what seemed to be needed the most. So that's what we did. We made the public request to the Galactic Federation of Worlds. And we said, do this. But then it was after we made that request, we had a situation where we realized they didn't have at least they had a public request. So that sort of addressed the lack of coherency or the lack of uniformity in beliefs the conflict that was going on inside the Galactic Federation of Worlds, at least if they heard a human group making an open request for their intervention. But then we said, okay, what are we going to do now? Because they're scared. That may have addressed the conflicts within the Galactic Federation of the Worlds, so that more of the different factions within the Galactic Federation of Worlds would say, okay, we're willing to go along. Humans seem to be asking for our help. That didn't happen before, so now we're willing to help. So that could have tipped the scale in terms of getting more people to want to help, more worlds wanting to help. But then we had to deal with the military side, so that's what caused us to do the second part of the negotiations, which was another thing. These are all videos we put up on YouTube so that everybody can see. Look, these people, these extraterrestrials have high tech. They have flying saucers that can cross intergalactic distances, so obviously they can watch YouTube. They can watch YouTube. They can watch our internet. So we just said, put the requests up on YouTube and let everybody else watch them and let the extraterrestrials watch them as well. And then we finally said, okay, let's go to the domain and ask for their help. But we knew that the domain we picked up when we did a project, we did an actual project on the domain. That was one of the most recent projects, and we found out that they're skittish. They like, when we popped up, in fact, when we popped up to one officer that was sort of looking over stuff of keeping, he was sort of in charge of keeping things, on sort of monitored on Earth. And the very first thing happened as soon as our remote viewers popped in front of his face was he put up a screen. He blocked it. Said, no, you're not doing this. Then we used our anti-blocking techniques and we got past and we saw him again. And but he wasn't so helpful. It wasn't really helpful until we got to the lead authority, the head of the domain, and we started asking that guy questions. And that guy basically said, you're small players, like why should we be listening to you? And we had to explain, but we've been dealing with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and I think they would help you if you entered into negotiations. So we had to actually talk to them and sort of say, we're trying to help things out, and we think that if you do things sort of the way we're suggesting and coordinate with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, that would help your situation a lot. And they seemed to agree with that, okay? And then that led to the third and final, just published, negotiation, which was back to the return to the Galactic Federation of Worlds, where we told them what we did. Now, in part, they were monitoring everything we're doing, so they already knew what we did, but we wanted to put it public so that everybody else could see what we did as well. So we went back to the Galactic Federation of Worlds on YouTube and said, this is what we've done. We've done it with the domain, and we think they would be very receptive if you would reach out an arm and enter into negotiations with them about the possibility of working together. They could serve as a backup military force and things like that. What needs to happen, first and foremost, is that the reptilian and the Orions have to be pushed off of the planet Earth. That's not going to solve the net that makes the death traps work. That's technology, apparently automated technology. But at least it gets the reptilians and the Orions off so that we can then put our smartest scientists onto the job of figuring out how to dismantle the amnesia system machines. So that's how that third and final piece of the negotiations happened. So that's the backstory for where we got to where we are now. We had no intention of being here where we are now in the very beginning. Again, when I first wrote Cosmic Voyage back in the 1990s, I just thought we were just seeing if there are extraterrestrials, and we said, hey, that's it, we found some. We had no idea that this was going to lead to where we are today. So I want to make just some final comments on the presentation itself, because people have made some comments about the acting. Now, if you notice the acting, it's exaggerated. It's like facial movements, moving the hands a lot, things like that. And some of the people had said, looks like bad acting. It's not bad acting. Let me explain what it is. It's the style of acting in which you see in silent movies, like back in 1920s. Or it's the style of facial movements and expressions that you see mimes use. Like you go to France and you see a mime on the street, they use exaggerated facial motions and hand motions. And the reason is, when we convey information, we depend so much on the sound of our voice carrying that information. But you're not using your voice when you're talking to extraterrestrials. You're talking telepathically. So I can't speak those words I have to think those words. So to make it as authentic as possible, it has to be telepathic communication, which means you don't see my mouth moving all the time. And so the thoughts come out that you can hear, but you don't see me mouthing all the words. So the style of acting has to be one where the facial expressions and the hand motions are exaggerated the exact same way you saw actors act in the silent movies. Remember the old days when you see the villain going after the young lady, and then in the old silent day movies where they had piano music in the background and that's it. And then you saw the good guy coming in to save the lady, and then the villain had tied her up on the railroad tracks, and the train was coming, and the good guy came, and he had to kill the villain, and he had to untie the lady, and he had to hold the lady and said, "I saved you." And the facial motions are just ridiculous, because the story had to be told with the facial motions without any words being spoken. That's the style of acting. So I thought, since I was going to be doing these parts, I said, well, that's the style that should probably be used in this type of thing where you have telepathic communication. So that sort of explains the style of acting for those 3 videos. Anyway, that's what I wanted to tell you. I wanted to tell you the history of all of our projects so that you could see how many projects there were. There were a ton of projects that got us to where we are today. We didn't just make a couple assumptions. We went through one project after the next, being led step by step by step, until we finally said, holy crow, what? So this is where we are? And in the final, at the very end, we started doing the negotiation thing just to see what would happen. Where we actually went to the domain, we went to the Galactic Federation of Worlds, and mind you, the viewers went in totally blind. They didn't know where they were going. And then they all got the same type of response, the same type of things. Anyway, so that's where we are. That's the history of our galaxy, history of our solar system, history of Earth, all tied together. The galaxy is a mess, folks. We're trying to piece it together. Apparently, Earth is the most important prison in the galaxy, and most people here don't even know, and that's how prisons are run these days. And when people die, they see the light. It's all done by technology, and they meet elders, guiders, counselors. And then they're zapped, and they're fed a bunch of information and recycled, and all of it's part of the system. That's how you control a prison population in this galactic day and age. And what we have to do is break out. And the way to break out, the very first step for breaking out, is to alert the mass population that it exists. And the first step for that is to alert the mass population that the extraterrestrials themselves exist. Obviously, if the extraterrestrials exist, and even the military is willing to say those are real craft, on the record, formally, they're saying those are real physical craft using very high levels of technology. There's no evidence that they're extraterrestrial, but they're not made by the United States, Russia, or China. What? Then what else is left? So clearly the military is implying that those are extraterrestrial spacecraft. Now, as soon as you accept that those are extraterrestrial spacecraft, the only questions that remain is, how long has this been going on? And any civilization that could get to us with extraterrestrial spacecraft has to have been around a long time. And if one was around, then you have to assume that you're dealing with a statistical situation, and the situation is there must be many, because the galaxy is huge. So as soon as you just connect the dots, you're realizing you're dealing with a galaxy full of life, and as above, so below. Just like we fight, they fight, and we need to pick sides. And the way to get out of this prison, first and foremost, is to have you folks all wake up. And that means you have to relearn the stuff that was zapped out of you with the death traps. You have to relearn telepathic communication, to relearn remote viewing communication, which is normal. It's like seeing and hearing for a normal person. Intuitions, that's normal. Remembering past lives, it's never been a situation of remembering things like ROM or RAM or putting things on a SSD drive. It's never been something like that where the data drive could get filled up because the memory is so big. Memory is not, that doesn't work that way. Memory works by perceiving across time and space to what you were doing a million years ago. You have direct access to all of that you've ever done. And all of that is gone in your capabilities because the electroshock treatments that happen after death. So the first thing is people have to start waking up, and then you have to start realizing that there is no such thing as advanced extraterrestrials. You are the advanced extraterrestrials, just that you were captured, zapped, and here you are. The advanced extraterrestrials are different from you only because they haven't been zapped. That's it. Otherwise, there's no difference. So that's the situation we are now. Step one, start to wake up. That's why we tell you we have the largest repository of free information on remote viewing methodologies. We have good qualified teachers also if you want to have teachers to do that. And we have the largest collection of projects anywhere with remote viewing. So, this is where you begin to look. And let me tell you, right around the same time, actually it was at the same time that the military said they were going to come out with this report about UFOs. A lot of things started to change in YouTube, for example. For now, if you do a search on YouTube and in Google on remote viewing, you won't find Farsight at all on Google at all. If you just do a search on remote viewing, just remote viewing, that's all. No matter how far down you go, that's brand new. We were always in the past, as of just a few weeks ago, at the very top. At the top 5. And with all of the other search engines, no matter which ones you use, we're still in the top 5. So if you go to Bing or Yahoo or DuckDuckGo or any of the other many search engines, we're always at the top. But with Google, you can't even find us. Now, I'm not complaining about Google at all. I'm just telling you that the world has changed, and the authorities are aware that they're a little worried about what information actually the public searches. They know that remote viewing is becoming a very big thing. A lot of people are doing searches on remote viewing, and in some ways Google has changed, and I'm not criticizing Google at all. I'm just telling you it's changed from their original product was a product to help people find things, and it's morphed into a product to control what people get access to. It's more like the Chinese model. So the Chinese model has search engines and so on like that, but it's all directed towards getting the information that the authorities want you to see. So if you do a search on remote viewing, the top 100 things that you'll see will be the things that you don't want to go to. Those are the things that the authorities want you to see. And so the thing that you can say about Farsight is we must be doing something right. Otherwise, the shadow banning wouldn't have happened in the first place. So if you want to know who's worthwhile to look at, here we are, folks. This is what you should be looking at. If you want to know what styles of remote viewing, the Farsight style of remote viewing is something that the authorities are a little concerned about, this is the style you want to learn. This is the style that really works, that especially with the applications that you want. So you'll see other people with other styles sort of saying, no, we do this, that, and the other thing. They're not being banned. Similarly, I want to say with regard to CRV, controlled remote viewing, Lynn Buchanan seems to have been shadow banned as well. His site, CR Viewer. Lynn is on our board of directors, and his version of CRV is apparently what some consider dangerous. So Farsight, apparently some people consider us dangerous. It's just the opposite. We have no sexual content on any of our stuff. We are absolutely opposed to the violence. We are absolutely and totally opposed to any type of hate speech or prejudice against any particular group whatsoever. Like, what are you banning us for? Because we chase aliens around the galaxy? Like, what? Are you serious? The only reason the banning would happen is if chasing aliens around the galaxy is for real. Do you understand that, everyone? There's no reason to ban somebody if they're doing ridiculous things that's just crazy. You ban somebody because they're doing something that's scary and you don't want the world to know about it. That's what the shadow banning is all about. There's no reason to ban Lynn Buchanan and his CR Viewer. There's no reason to ban Farsight. Then Buchanan has no sexual content. He's absolutely opposed to violence, and he has absolutely great hatred towards any type of speech that is against people. Hate speech, anything like that. He doesn't want anything to do with that. Same with Farsight. So like, why? What do you have against us? Folks, we use remote viewing in very effective ways. We have extremely advanced methods for doing that, and this is what you should know, because this is what they don't want you to know. Anyway, let that percolate in your mind. If you ever wanted proof that what you're listening to with Farsight is important and real, you just got it. Supplied to you by Google and YouTube. All right. So we have a big audience now, 1,417 people. So this live stream, I'm actually going to be putting it together with a combined version of all three public negotiations for the things with the extraterrestrials. So that's going to come out. And because they're public negotiations, it's not going to be limited to just Farsight Prime. It's going to go out on Farsight Prime and YouTube as well. And so this live stream will be part of that package. I decided to put the live stream together with the negotiations so people could see the whole thing. It'd be a long movie, like 2.5 hours, but what the heck, it's fun and interesting, and it is what you need to know, but they don't want you to know. Okay, hey folks, let me say, you got 1,400 people here. This is a great turnout, and do you realize that we would be doing nothing, we would have nothing if it wasn't for you? It's not that we're doing really hard stuff and we're valuable for what we do. We're valuable because we resonate with a group of people that are special. That's you. Good. You are all here. Let's proceed to the council chambers. You all know the way. I want to thank you for granting me a hearing before this august body. Although my memories have been only partially restored, I sense that I may have stood before you or among you in the past. I come before you today as an Earth human, fully human in every sense of the word. I was born on Earth, a product of a human mother and father. I was raised as a human. I was educated as a human. And I had all of the perceptual limitations built into my genetics as would be typical of a normal human. My team, which also joins me here today, are also entirely human. Our physical bodies remain on Earth right now, and we have all traveled here of our own accord and using only our own abilities. My physical body is currently in a near dormant condition, in a state known on Earth as deep meditation, while my team is fully awake on Earth, while their consciousness has shifted to this location using what humans would call a process of remote viewing. Now my point is that we all stand before you as full humans. Except for a minor navigational incident where I was nearly intercepted en route by the Seakard, we found you using our own human abilities, and we came here using only our own human abilities. We desire only for you to hear what we have to say, and for you to hear what we have to ask of you as humans from our imprisoned planet Earth. As you are all fully aware, the war in the Orion system resulted in a large number of refugees to flee to Earth over a great many years. Their normal transference to the planet was to be born there. Eventually, the Orion authorities discovered the refugee outflow, and they sent their representatives to transform Earth
into a prison planet, extending their tyranny yet again. Technology was installed that is well known in the Orion system that erases a subject's memory upon physical death, implants false memories, and then recycles the subject back into another human life cycle, essentially keeping a population under lock and key without an easy way of escape. Forces from the Galactic Federation of Worlds managed to disrupt the overt control over the planet by the Orion operatives a few thousand Terran years ago. Those same Orion operatives still performed their repressive duties, albeit on a more limited matter and from hidden retreats. But what is perhaps more disturbing is that the Orion operatives have become allies of convenience to reptilian forces that have established a serious presence on Earth. The real controllers of the planet now are the reptilians, while the Orion operatives act to do much of the reptilian bidding. The condition of humanity on Earth now is one of deep repression. Humans are kept in a constant state of division. Religions and political ideologies have been established that are used to pit one human group against another in a non-ending cycle of violence and terror. Humans too easily see each other as enemies, and they are powerless to break from this cycle of blame and retribution. Still, there has been progress of a limited nature. Humanity has started to regain some of its collective memory, as is evidenced by such things as human architecture, which now resembles a close parallel to the architecture typical in Orion cities. Humans have also developed sizably in the realm of technology, and if they were left alone, they would undoubtedly be able to achieve interstellar travel capabilities in a relatively short period of time, a situation which I know worries you. I know that you do not want a chaotic and fragmented humanity arriving at your doorsteps, but that can be changed. Humanity can achieve more than this. Yes, I hear you. I know that humans are not culturally, politically, or emotionally ready to interact with the Galactic Federation of Worlds. They remain in need of development in those areas, but that development will be impossible if they remain under reptilian and Orion influence. They need freedom and gentle guidance from true friends who have no intention of enslaving them. As you know, the reptilians and the Orions want only to capture the resources of Earth, and humanity's genetic diversity is crucial in this regard. With a mixed gene pool from all over the galaxy due to Earth being both a place of refuge and a dumping ground for the unwanted creatives and more stifling civilizations, the gene pool of humanity is truly remarkable on any standards. The reptilians and the Orions want control over that gene pool. If it were not for the inhibiting presence of the forces loyal to the Galactic Federation of Worlds, the reptilians and the Orions would already be at war, fighting over control for that gene pool. They see humanity as no more than a pool of genetic slaves, as well as a resource of slaves for assorted other horrifying purposes, and you all know what they use humans for. I do not need to spell that out here. My time is limited here. I can keep my concentration focused on this location for only so long before the needs of my physical body drags my awareness back to Earth. So let me get to the point. Humanity requires your direct intervention to remove the reptilian and Orion forces from Earth. You know that humanity cannot do this by itself. You ask, why should I speak for all of humanity? Why should I assume to be their representative? I was not chosen or elected by anyone on Earth, but there are no elected or chosen representatives among humans who could claim this role. Human leadership on Earth has been totally compromised by the oppressive reptilian and Orion forces, sometimes unknowingly, but often with consent. None can act freely without mental manipulation, bribery, or external pressure. So I do claim the right to represent all of humanity, as is the right of all humans who can find the courage to discard the repressive control common to the Earth environment and reach out to you. I assume that right because I am here. No other reason is necessary. I have broken free from the mental manipulation of the reptilian and Orion forces. Both I and my team have come to you today as free humans. We are evidence, indeed proof, that humanity is worth saving. If even one human can break free from the totalitarian control of the oppressive forces, then it is evidence that all of humanity has that capability. We come here not to ask you to adopt us as your dependents. We come here to demand that we be allowed to become your equals. Humanity can become one of the greatest contributors to a positive future for the Galactic Federation of Worlds if it can be allowed to exist, free from the forces of enslavement. Judge humanity not by what it is now, judge it by what it can become under your tutelage, as friends, as equals. I ask you to remove the hidden oppressive forces that secretly tyrannize humanity and help Earth humans awaken to their true history and their confident destiny. Returning that history to them, that which has been so carefully erased from their collective memory, will free them, and it will allow you to see their true value as friends and allies. If you abandon humanity in this moment of greatest need and potential, then you will still have the same war-torn galaxy as you have now, and you will enable the most repressive forces in the galaxy to gain resources that they will ultimately use against you. I know it will not be easy for you to free humanity. The reptilians and the Orions will not leave Earth willingly, but if you assist humanity in its hour of need, you will one day, in the not-too-distant future, find that this same humanity will gladly fight alongside of you as you seek to liberate other worlds under the control of totalitarian forces. These humans will know full well what they are fighting for. Assist humanity now, and you create the potential for the rise of a species with a positive destiny, the likes of which this galaxy has never known.
Let's just go home now. You've said your piece. Let's just go.
All right, Aziz, let's go maybe right up here. Just a little farther. Okay, this is good. All right.
So, Dad, where exactly are you going? Where is the center of the domain?
Actually, I don't think they have a central location. That would be an attack vector. They're scattered throughout the entire galaxy, planets, and ships. Wherever they are, I will find them.
Do you need anything? New shirt?
No, actually, they'll see me as I see myself. Actually, I could
get one thing. If you could meditate, that would help center me so I could stay focused.
All right, will do.
Members of the domain, I greet you from Earth, a planet on the periphery of our galaxy, in a solar system which you now claim as a territory of the domain, even though your control over that system is far from complete. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to hear what I have to say, and for what I have to ask of you. This may be of great significance to your future expansion within this galaxy. I come to you as a member of a group of Earth humans known as Farsight, and we have offered ourselves to speak on behalf of humanity to the domain as well as to other galactic powers, as I will explain in a moment. Your control over Earth's solar system is relatively new, as is true of many planetary systems within this galaxy. There are still many old Empire forces still active on Earth and around the entire galactic system that are opposed to the domain. I think we can all agree that anything that greatly shortens the time in which the old Empire forces can be decisively eliminated would be as beneficial to the domain as it would be to the entire galactic population. As you know, Earth has long been operated as a prison for the old Empire. You may have destroyed the central power structure of the old Empire in the galaxy, but its reach continues in a decentralized manner, driven by the self-serving interests of its dispersed and leftover forces. Earth remains active as a prison for the old Empire. The degree of oppression that has been experienced by the Earth's population for a very long time cannot be overstated. To this day, new prisoners continue to be dumped into the prison system from realms far and wide. And as you also know, a few thousand of your own members were trapped in the Earth prison system a few thousand years ago, and they remain trapped there. Now, I am fully aware that you have no current direct interest in the billions who are trapped in the Earth prison, except for the eventual release and rehabilitation of your own trapped members. The Holocaust that this galaxy has experienced over the past million years and the Earth prison itself were not of your making. And I understand that the domain has to be careful in how it utilizes its own resources such that you do not become overburdened by attempting to do too much too soon. But what I have to offer you today is a proposal, a very real possibility, by which you could regain your trapped members and also greatly expand your influence over the remainder of this galaxy, significantly shortening the expected thousands of years that it would otherwise take for you to eradicate the remaining influence of the old Empire. This proposal would also dramatically increase the support which many civilizations within this galaxy might offer you. Moreover, this plan involves very few resources on your part if executed properly. The plan is daring, but it is a realistic possibility. Let me explain. Throughout this galaxy, while the old Empire ruled over hundreds of thousands of years, the dominant emphasis of that rule was simply the continuation of savage and oppressive control, the virtual and actual enslavement of an entire galaxy for the benefit of the oppressing few. Beings everywhere were confined to planets, recycled life after life, utilized as an exploited labor force, sexually exploited, tortured, kidnapped, memory wiped. The list of abuses are unending, but nowhere have these exploitive and punishing efforts been as extensively used than on Earth. Now, the Earth prison population contains some of the most talented and creative minds in this galaxy. When creative minds in nearly every realm emerged in art, science, the humanities, the social sciences, or any other area, the oppressive controllers across the galaxy saw them as a threat to the status quo and threw them into the Earth prison. Anyone who saw beauty in change was a threat, since change is the essence of creativity, and beauty and change disrupt the status quo. Added to this mix of creative geniuses is an extraordinary blend of diverse cultures from across the galaxy. Since so many parts of this galaxy and apparently nearby galaxies have utilized Earth as a prison, the level of cultural diversity on Earth may be unprecedented anywhere else in this galaxy and perhaps other galaxies. These are all aspects of great potential for the Earth population, and these subjects could turn out to become highly valued citizens of the domain in the future. But of course, there are also less desirable elements within Earth's population, and I do not deny this. Seriously deranged and savage criminals from realms far and wide have also been thrown into this Earth prison, and I fully recognize that such criminals need to be separated from the remainder of the population eventually. Unfortunately, many of such criminals tend to be very active and engaged in positions of authority, and more than a few are the rulers of numerous nations on Earth, including some of the most powerful nations on the planet. This will eventually need to be sorted out properly. Earth is not a simple situation. I think we can all agree on that. There is another powerful group within this galaxy which is not yet aligned with the domain: the Galactic Federation of Worlds. Now, you are fully aware that this is a highly diverse group spanning many planetary systems and cultures. They are as opposed to the old empire as is the domain. But the Galactic Federation of Worlds also has a long history with humanity and Earth. And to be honest, its history has been a mixture of both good and bad, but mostly good, especially in recent years. In general terms, the majority of the membership of the Galactic Federation of Worlds would like to free humanity from the Earth prison, and indeed feel passionately about this. Unfortunately, they do not have the military strength to defeat the combined forces of the old empire, which include both the reptilian and Orion elements. The Galactic Federation of Worlds needs an ally, or what humans might more realistically call backup. You see, from our perspective, the reptilian and Orion forces, while currently allies of convenience, are not particularly brave, nor are they faithful to one another. They do not fight out of principle. They fight for selfish advantage. If they think that there is a chance that they will lose a battle, a good portion of their forces will retreat rather than engage in open conflict. This, indeed, is why the domain continues to engage old empire forces. They flee and hide, attacking when they think there is a temporary advantage, and then hiding once again. In fact, that is indeed why you lost a battalion on Earth a few thousand years ago. Your forces did not even know that the old empire was operating in the Earth's solar system. Stealth and deception is their primary weapon. Now, the Galactic Federation of Worlds could act to free everyone from the Earth prison, including your own trapped members. Indeed, they desire to act. However, the cowardice of the reptilian and Orion forces needs to be utilized in this struggle if we are to succeed. If the domain military acted as a backup force, one that would intervene should the military of the Galactic Federation of Worlds run into trouble when confronting the old Empire military forces operating on and near Earth, then it is nearly certain that parts of the Orion and reptilian forces would retreat, and the military of the Galactic Federation of Worlds would be victorious. Thus, the domain would not have to actually commit its military to battle, as long as it is prepared to do so, should there be trouble that the Galactic Federation of Worlds cannot handle by itself. As long as the Orion and reptilian forces are certain that if they become engaged in a serious struggle, then they would face the combined forces of the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the domain, then, once realizing this, many of their forces would retreat rather than face defeat. Consider the advantages of this strategy. First, the domain and the Galactic Federation of Worlds would begin working as allies. The domain espouses many of the ideals that are largely supported by the majority of the membership of the Galactic Federation of Worlds. You are compatible allies, but there is more. The population of this galaxy is fully ready for a change in governance. The Holocaust created by the old empire has gone on for an unimaginably long period of time, and the galaxy wants it to end once and for all. Moreover, this galaxy's population knows that Earth has been the most seriously oppressed planet for a very long time. Should you help the Galactic Federation of Worlds in removing the oppressors from Earth, then everyone in the entire galaxy would know that you support freedom from oppression. You would win the hearts and minds of the galactic population, and this is not something that can be done with military might alone. Conquering an enemy militarily is different from winning the hearts of the people. Helping the Galactic Federation of Worlds in the task of freeing humanity from its oppressors would win you friends, lots of friends, and strategically, that is worth a lot in any galaxy. Now, in terms of your own members who are currently confined to the Earth prison, they will need new approaches to regain their memories. The effects of the old empire amnesia system on all of Earth's prison population have no cure that is currently known to the domain or anyone else. No one else in this galaxy or any other galaxy is more prepared to solve this problem than specialists from within the population of Earth, those who have experienced the direct effects of the amnesia system. This is spiritually comparable to a profound psychological disorder, and the best physicians to treat such a disorder are often those who have personal experience with such a disorder. Humans can help your imprisoned compatriots, who, by the way, have now had thousands of years' experience living as Earth humans. They will understand one another, and they can help one another. It is worthwhile to allow this to follow its own course once the entirety of the human population is freed. Finally, let me discuss my own and Farsight's role in this. We know that you are not currently coordinating your activities with the Galactic Federation of Worlds, at least with respect to Earth and its imprisoned population. However, we have established communication with them, and we believe we can act as a productive link between the domain and the Galactic Federation of Worlds. For an alliance to form that will help all sides, it is crucial that Earth humans directly request this assistance. the Galactic Federation of Worlds will not intervene in Earth's affairs to the level that is required unless Earth humans ask for this assistance. And that is our role. Our authority to negotiate for Earth and its masses is due to the fact that we have acted to break free from the totalitarian system of social control that is enforced by the old empire forces still active on Earth, and by the fact that we stand before you here today. No other authorization is needed. As humans, we request assistance for all other humans on Earth. Traditional human leadership on Earth has been totally corrupted by the old empire forces. Indeed, old empire forces are deeply embedded on Earth today because of secretive deals that were made between them and traditional human leadership. Deception, lies, bribery, and direct mental influence were all used to establish these arrangements. Eventually, nearly all human leadership, minimally religious and political leadership, but also a great deal of news, media, and even commercial leadership will have to be changed. It is not the role of Farsight or myself to recommend how this should be done or how extensive this change should be. But it is nonetheless clear that current compromised leaders will continue to stand as blocks to human emancipation if they are left to continue to benefit from what they can salvage from the old system of oppression. So someone is going to have to sort that out. As for the secretive arrangements that were arranged by the old empire forces and the corrupted traditional human leadership, those arrangements were made under false pretenses. There was no element of truthfulness or transparency involved in those negotiations. Moreover, all of humanity was sold out by traditional human leadership, and there has never been a publication of the arrangements or their implications. To this day, humanity has not been informed of the arrangements or even that extraterrestrials exist with whom such arrangements could have been made. Control over humanity is fundamentally structured and enforced by total secrecy. Part of the role of Farsight is to end this secrecy. So, as representatives of Earth and Earth humans, we will request that the Galactic Federation of Worlds enter into direct negotiations with the domain for the purpose of forming an alliance to dismantle the Earth prison system. As Earth humans who have broken free from the control of the old empire thought control mechanisms, we have the right to do this. There is tremendous potential for benefits to the domain by establishing an alliance with the Galactic Federation of Worlds. This alliance can continue as the domain and the Galactic Federation of Worlds together seek to rid this galaxy of the remaining oppressive forces of the old empire. This will not only shorten the time needed to accomplish this, it will also act to create a galaxy of supporters for the alliance. The domain has the potential of gaining a galaxy of eager and willing supporters and possible citizens, something that could never be achieved by military intervention alone. Finally, humanity is now a very special group in this galaxy. It is a group that has been forced to learn how to coexist with its diversity. It is true that the oppressive forces of the old empire that operate on Earth have managed to throw humanity into a continuing state of crises of all sorts, including war and disease. Nonetheless, despite those destructive efforts, cultures of vastly different types have experienced living together, struggling to cooperate with one another. Of course, there have been conflicts. Cultural clashes are common in this and other galaxies, but nowhere has there been more progress in learning how to live in harmony with one another than on Earth.
And this is despite the disruptive influences of the old empire forces. Humanity is now special, and beings who have lived through the human experience can greatly assist the peaceful coexistence of diverse cultures throughout this and other galaxies as a result of these common experiences. Humanity can be a resource for the domain, a resource that may not be found in comparable measure anywhere else. I ask you to consider this request. Allow the Galactic Federation of Worlds to enter into direct communications with you. Together, the domain and the Galactic Federation of Worlds can form an alliance that can change this galaxy for the better in ways that may be unprecedented in this and possibly other galaxies. Progress is not measured in technological achievements, since there are many places in which everything that can be invented has already been invented. True progress will be found within the social sciences and the humanities. Beings of all types, cultures, and species learning to live together in harmony. There will always be a need for adequate military defenses to protect civilizations from invading hostile forces, but military defenses are only as strong as the societies which they defend. And societies with populations who are at peace with one another are the strongest. Humanity can help build those bridges across the diverse populations within this galaxy, thereby strengthening the domain internally. Assist humanity now, in its moment of greatest need, and the domain will win the hearts and minds of a galactic population that will carry it through to success and prosperity far into the future. This is a tremendous moment of opportunity for the domain. An alliance with the Galactic Federation of Worlds will strengthen the hand of the domain dramatically and rapidly. Build on this. Let the Galactic Federation of Worlds strengthen the domain, and let the domain strengthen the Galactic Federation of Worlds. March into the future together as one, helping each other in ways that can only be glimpsed currently. This universe needs beings who work together. This is the example to make for all the universe to witness, an example of collaboration for the purpose of assisting in the betterment of a galaxy in desperate need. This is the example that everyone, everywhere needs to see across time, space, and dimensions. Let the universe say that if this type of humanitarian collaboration can be made in this galaxy, then it is possible anywhere, and anyone can do it. Together, let us show this universe how this can be done. Let this be the example that sends fear into the hearts of totalitarian oppressors and real hope into the hearts of those who are oppressed, regardless of where or when they may exist. Let all of us show everyone what is possible when species and cultures link together in common cause. This is the moment to do this. This is the moment to eradicate the darkness of oppression and turn on the light.
Hey, Dad, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
All right. Well, what happened? What'd they say?
They were there. They heard. Now we wait and see. Son, we're done here.
All right.
You can take me home.
Okay.
want to thank all of you for allowing me another opportunity to address this august body. Since I last spoke with you, our group of remote viewers at Farsight, humans based on the prison planet, Earth, have spent a great deal of time investigating approaches to eliminating the reptilian and Orion influences on that planet. We have explored the past, the present, and possible futures. We have seen firsthand how the reptilian and Orion alliance duped human leadership into signing agreements that allowed them unfettered access to Earth and its people. We also know that a primary reason for pursuing such agreements was to forestall any attempts by the Galactic Federation of Worlds to intervene in their exploitive activities. If they had a legal agreement between human leadership on Earth and themselves to conduct their activities, on what basis would the membership of the Galactic Federation of Worlds challenge this? The Reptilian and Orion Alliance then used those agreements to establish a foothold on the planet that appeared to be legally embraced by human leadership. This foothold has been exploited far beyond any original parameters or expectations conceived of by the original human leadership who signed those agreements, and now the current human leadership has been so thoroughly corrupted by the resulting oppressive system that they have become a great liability for humanity. Let us be frank. The agreements signed by the Reptilian and Orion Alliance with traditional human leadership are a total sham. They were made under false pretenses. The naive human leadership was tricked into signing any agreement, regardless of the cost, due to possible military threats from deadly enemies who had access to advanced weaponry. The human leadership was totally unaware that it was the Reptilian and Orion Alliance itself that set up those military threats to scare the human leadership into signing the agreements. There was absolutely no truthfulness or transparency involved in the negotiations. There has also never been a publication of the agreements to the general human public, and extreme efforts are made to this day to prevent the human masses on Earth from even knowing that extraterrestrials of any sort exist, let alone extraterrestrials who exploit humanity ruthlessly for selfish reasons. Secrecy has always been and continues to be the primary means of securing continued control over Earth's population. That, plus the amnesia system that robs all beings on Earth of their memories as they cycle between lives, are the two primary means of maintaining Earth as a prison. Friends, if I may call you that, for I know that the majority of your members want to dismantle the Earth prison system and liberate the billions of slaves who are confined there. Friends, we need a new approach. Nothing lasts forever. Nothing. Eventually, the walls of the Earth prison system will come down. However, what will be the state of humanity when that happens? If the beings imprisoned on Earth are left to rot for thousands of years more, how will they feel about the galaxy as a whole and even the Galactic Federation of Worlds? How will those beings reintegrate into galactic life after being tortured ruthlessly for millennia upon millennia with no one lifting a finger to come to their assistance? Will they re-enter galactic life with unfettered rage? Will they seek revenge upon the entire galaxy? No one can deny that this huge population has been abused unconscionably, and the perpetrators are not few, nor are they limited to only one part of the galaxy. You cannot kill the beings imprisoned on Earth, so eventually they will be at your doorstep. And then what will happen? Humanity must evolve from the Earth prison planet to become constructive and positive contributors to a beneficial galactic future. As the galaxy slowly emerges from the holocaust of the past million years under the repression of the old empire, humanity will play a role one way or another.
Without guidance or friends, their rage may consume them to the detriment of all. But with some guidance and friendship from the Galactic Federation of Worlds, Earth humans can become unique and valued allies. The time is right to shape humanity's future such that it is characterized by a deep and abiding friendship with this body. The oppressive forces are relatively weak now. Now is the time to act. The time is now for an intervention to take place to release that population from their prison. The time is now for that population to know that there are many in this galaxy who oppose how they have been treated, how they have been kidnapped, tortured, taken from their homes and families, and thrown into a planetary torture chamber that is designed to last indefinitely without hope of escape. The time is now that humanity needs to know that the Galactic Federation of Worlds fights for their freedom, for their liberation, for their dignity as beings in this universe. The time is now for all of humanity to know that they stand not alone against galactic tyranny. Humanity needs to know that it has friends in this galaxy, friends who are willing to sacrifice themselves for the greater good of the oppressed masses. Yes, I know that your hearts are in the right place, but I am also aware that the military capabilities of the Galactic Federation of Worlds might not be enough to be victorious against the combined militaries of the Reptilians and the Orions. Although they are allies of convenience who seek to exploit humanity for their own individual purposes, they nonetheless still have significant collective military capacity in the vicinity of Earth. But you also know that both the Reptilians and Orions never fight for principles. They fight for profit and gain. And as with all such enemies, they do not fight when the odds are against them. Those who fight for principles are by definition brave. Those who fight for personal gain are by definition cowards. If they believe they can emerge from the shadows and attack and steal only to return to the shadows unscathed with their plunder, then they will gladly fight. But convince them that their chances are slim in a serious military confrontation, and they will run back into the shadows. It is the way of cowards. Their weakness is their lack of principles on which to base their actions and their existence. So I come before you today to announce to you that the group of humans with whom I work on Earth, Farsight, have approached another group with strong military capabilities, the Domain. You are all aware of the Domain. You have watched their steady incursion into this galaxy and their steady yet gradual progress at confronting the old Empire's fascistic forces. They are relatively new to this galaxy, but they have extensive military capabilities in both this and other galaxies. The Domain will eventually completely demolish the Earth prison system. Indeed, some of its own members are trapped within it. But the Domain is very careful about how quickly it expands. They appear to be careful not to extend their reach beyond their abilities to maintain their control. So while the Domain plans to eventually expand their activities in the neighborhood of Earth's solar system, and then to dedicate sufficient resources to demolishing the prison system, it will take them thousands of years to do this. To my knowledge, no one has ever claimed that the Domain is in too much of a rush to do things. Now, the Domain has views of galactic governance that appear very compatible with the egalitarian perspective of the majority of the membership of the Galactic Federation of Worlds. Both the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the Domain could be natural allies. Indeed, I think it important that such an alliance be initiated. As a representative of Earth humans working within the auspices of Farsight's activities, I have requested to the Domain leadership that they accept a request
from the Galactic Federation of Worlds for a dialogue, should you wish to contact them in this regard. What we have proposed to the domain is that they offer themselves as a backup military force that would supplement a more direct intervention by the Galactic Federation of Worlds on Earth. That is, the military forces of the Galactic Federation of Worlds could intervene on Earth to push out the reptilian and Orion forces on and near Earth, forces that currently plague that planet. The reptilian and Orion forces would know that any attempt to seriously challenge the military of the Galactic Federation of Worlds would trigger the domain military to step in to buttress your side. Knowing that any direct and serious military conflict with the Galactic Federation of Worlds would bring the domain military into the mix, the reptilian and Orion forces would know with certainty that they could not win such a battle. So the probabilities of them seriously fighting such a battle is remote. In all likelihood, they will retreat. Using this strategy, the domain knows that it is unlikely that they will have to actually deploy their forces to Earth's solar system, even though they would remain fully aware that they would do so if needed. Thus, the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the domain together can defeat the combined reptilian and Orion forces, or rather, those oppressors can be chased from the Earth's solar system, forcing them once again into hiding. I have suggested to the domain that this alliance between themselves and the Galactic Federation of Worlds would have huge benefits to both parties. It would greatly shorten the time needed to eliminate the remaining dispersed elements of the old empire throughout the galaxy. It would also place the Galactic Federation of Worlds in a much stronger position by having an ally. The emancipation of Earth humans would be an initial step that could lead to a long-term alliance between the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the domain that would benefit both groups in the short term and the long term. We could, collectively, finally end this Holocaust that has plagued this galaxy for far, far too long. So I ask you today to meet among yourselves and then to act, to reach out to the domain. My understanding is that they will be willing to listen to you. They will be willing to entertain the idea of an alliance between the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the domain. Indeed, my reading is that they would be eager to establish such an alliance should the conditions be favorable to both sides. Moreover, it is us, Earth humans, who have formally requested this from both the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the domain. The sham agreements that were made secretly between corrupted and tricked traditional human leadership and the reptilian and Orion operatives are null and void. The agreements have never been approved by any of the Earth's population, and indeed, the Earth's population has never even been told that the agreements exist, or that the extraterrestrials with whom the agreements were made even exist. The agreements are based on fraud and deceit, and no such agreements can be considered valid if the affected parties are kept in total ignorance of their content, or even their existence. Under no circumstances can the Galactic Federation of Worlds find any justification in respecting those agreements. Also, nearly all traditional human leadership has been totally corrupted by the reptilian and Orion manipulative activities that include coercion, bribery, threats, and direct mental influencing, always utilizing intermediaries and secrecy, of course. So nothing positive or truthful can be obtained from traditional human leadership. Moreover, someone is going to have to sort out the issue of removing some or much of traditional human leadership from power eventually, and that includes religious, political, news, and media, as well as some economic leadership, since it is impossible for humanity to move forward if traditional human leadership continues to benefit from what they can salvage from the old system of oppression. It is not the role of Farsight or myself to recommend how this should be done or how extensive this change should be, but clearly someone is going to have to sort that out. Now let me address the last major point, disclosure. The Earth prison system is fundamentally maintained by two elements: information control and the amnesia system that operates between lives. We will have to deal with the technical aspects of the amnesia system after the reptilian and Orion elements are removed from the Earth's solar system. However, the information control system needs to be addressed now. The first step is for the Galactic Federation of Worlds to reach out to the domain to enter into negotiations about becoming allies, with the initial joint efforts focused on removing the reptilian and Orion elements from the vicinity of Earth. So, starting the negotiations needs to happen right away. Assuming that some agreement can be reached with the domain, the second step is to break the information lock on humanity. My own personal suggestion would be that this could occur in the form of a mass and extended sighting of extraterrestrial spacecraft, something that human leadership cannot deny or explain away. That will trigger all that follows. Some strategic and scattered landings with friendly encounters might also be involved. Anything smaller than a worldwide mass sighting will be squashed by the compromised human leadership. The sighting needs to be of sufficient size such that spin control by human leadership will not work. Human leadership will almost certainly initially announce that this is an alien invasion, and they will try to frighten humanity into a state of paralysis. So the sighting would need to be extended enough to dispel those efforts. In general, traditional human leadership must be considered hostile to human emancipation. You must circumvent their abilities to control the information for this to work. In my opinion, under no circumstances should you rely on traditional human leadership to do anything other than to serve their own selfish interests, interests that are closely tied to the continuation of humanity's enslavement. The Galactic Federation of Worlds must guide the discussions and events that follow the mass sightings, sort of in a manner in which a psychiatrist communicates with a patient with a mental illness who is in a deep state of denial. The mass sighting will also probably trigger a reaction by the reptilian and Orion operatives, and this is the point at which you would need to engage your military. Again, these are only my suggestions. You will have to make up your own minds as to the most viable strategy to pursue. Obviously, I cannot force you to do this in any single way, but as a human living on Earth, this is what I think needs to happen for the situation on Earth and in the galaxy to move forward. Let me repeat and emphasize one final thought. You cannot rely on traditional human leadership for anything at all. If you expect anything helpful from them, you will almost certainly be disappointed. Nothing good can come from them, since they all profit from a continuation of the status quo. They are enablers of the slavery system, collaborators with the oppressors of humanity, sometimes unknowingly as victims of mental manipulation, but often simply following the reward system that has been set up for them. They have absolutely no true authority to speak for humanity due to the fact that their actions and their rise to power have been so carefully orchestrated by old empire operatives, with or without their conscious knowledge. They should not be relied on as actual human leadership by any extraterrestrials who want to assist humanity in ending human imprisonment. You need to bypass them, at least initially, and perhaps for the long term as well, until new leadership can be established that is no longer dependent on the old empire reward system. I am not certain how this will work out, and perhaps you have experience in dealing with populations whose leadership has been compromised. Ultimately, you will have to sort out who you wish to deal with, or rather, how you wish to interact with humanity. Friends, everyone in the galaxy is watching what happens on Earth right now. This is a play that must have a final act that gives real hope, not just to humans on Earth, but also to every being who has lived through this Holocaust that has dominated galactic life over the past 1,000,000 years. I am not asking you to help just humanity. Everyone in the galaxy needs to see this act of emancipation happen. Consider who is asking this of you. Humans, born and raised on Earth from within the prison system itself, myself and others at Farsight, overcoming the social and cultural blocks that inhibit free thought and liberty, rising up, gaining a significant mass following, and then reaching out across the galaxy to formally request intervention. We have circumvented all traditional human leadership in reaching out to you today. The fact that we are here is the only authority that is needed for us to ask for your assistance. Everyone who reaches out to you of their own free will and as a result of their own efforts to be free has the right to represent those who remain imprisoned. So, in every literal sense of the word, we formally request that you assist humanity in this moment of peril. This is a moment with great potential, with eyes across the galaxy watching everything that everyone here and elsewhere does that relates to the final emancipation of this galaxy from oppression that has far too long sought to crush the spirit of all that is. Now is the moment to act. Now is the moment to redirect the galactic timeline to one with a great and hopeful future. If we act now with forceful determination, everywhere across time and space, people will say, if humans on Earth can obtain their freedom, then everyone, everywhere can do it too. Send that message throughout the galaxy, through your thoughts and actions. The entire universe will know and feel what we do today. Nothing can stop us from succeeding if we act now with clarity and resolution. Let that be our intent, and let that be our destiny.